The first car ever sold wasn't tied just a product. It was a message to the world. Don set wait for permission to create the future. This is the story of the first car ever sold. But more than that, it's the story of obsession, rejection, courage, and a moment that changed civilization forever. The world before the automobile. The year is 1885. Queen Victoria rules the British Empire. The Statue of Liberty is still being assembled, and across the world every city sounds exactly the same. The clip-clop of hooves, the creak of wooden wheels, the smell of manure filling the streets. For over 5,000 years, horses had been humanity's answer to distance. Carriages for the rich, walking for everyone else. Speed, that was a dream reserved for trains on fixed tracks. But the late 1800s were different. This was the age of invention. Edison was perfecting the light bulb. Bell had just patented the telephone. The world was waking up to a new idea. Maybe, just maybe, the impossible was possible. In workshops and garages across Europe, tinkerers and dreamers were asking a dangerous question. What if we didn't need horses anymore? What if a machine could carry us? Steam engines existed, but they were massive, dangerous, impractical. Some inventors tried bicycles with motors. Others built bizarre contraptions that exploded or collapsed. But in Mannheim, Germany, there was a man who refused to give up. A man who had failed again and again and again. A man named Karl Benz. Karl Benz IV, the obsessed inventor. Karl Benz was not supposed to succeed. Born in 1844 to a railway worker, who died when Karl was just 2 years old. He grew up in poverty. His mother worked herself to exhaustion to send him to school. But Karl had something most people didn't: an obsession. He wasn't interested in becoming a doctor or a lawyer. He wanted to build machines, engines, things that moved. At 27, he started his first company. It failed. He tried again, failed again. His inventions didn't work. Investors pulled out. Friends called him crazy. His wife, Bertha, had to use her dowry just to keep them afloat. But Karl kept building. By the early 1880s, Karl Benz had an idea that consumed him: a self-propelled vehicle, not powered by steam, not pulled by horses, but driven by an internal combustion engine running on gasoline. People laughed. Gasoline? That smelly, dangerous substance used in lamps? Madness. For years, Karl worked in his small workshop, designing, testing, failing, his hands covered in grease, his mind racing with calculations. He invented a new kind of engine, a two-stroke design, lightweight, powerful enough to move a vehicle. And on January 29, 1886, it happened. Karl Benz's three-wheeled Motorwagen rolled out of his workshop. It looked strange, fragile, almost comical. 3 bicycle-sized wheels, a single-cylinder engine mounted in the back, a wooden bench for a seat. But it moved, under its own power. No horses, no steam, just a machine. Karl Benz had created the world's first true automobile. On January 29, 1886, he filed a patent number 37,435, the birth certificate of the car. But here's the thing about revolutionary inventions: nobody cares until they see it work. Karl demonstrated his Motorwagen in public. The engine sputtered, it stalled, it moved at a walking pace. People mocked it, called it a toy, a joke. The press ignored him. Investors stayed away. Karl Benz had invented the future, but no one believed him. He needed proof. He needed someone to show the world that this machine wasn't just a curiosity. He needed a believer. He already had one. Her name was Bertha. Bertha Benz, the drive that changed everything. Bertha Benz was not a typical 19th century wife. She was a businesswoman, an investor, a risk-taker. When she married Karl, she didn't just support his dreams, she funded them. Her dowry kept his workshops alive through every failure. But by 1888, she'd seen enough. Karl's invention was brilliant, but he was too cautious, too careful. He kept tinkering, improving, hesitating. The world needed to see what this machine could do. And if Karl wouldn't show them, Bertha would. On August 5, 1888, before dawn, Bertha Benz did something extraordinary. She woke up her two teenage sons, Eugen and Richard. She told them to get dressed, quietly. Then, without telling Karl, she pushed the Motorwagen out of the workshop and started the engine. Bertha Benz was about to drive 66 miles, from Mannheim to Persefheim, to visit her mother. 66 miles doesn't sound like much today, but in 1888, on unpaved roads, in an untested machine, it was insane. There were no gas stations, no repair shops, no maps for motor vehicles. But Bertha didn't care. She climbed into the driver's seat, her sons beside her, and drove into the unknown. The Motorwagen sputtered and groaned. It broke down repeatedly. The fuel line clogged. Bertha cleaned it with her hairpin. The ignition wire wore out. She used her garter as insulation. The brakes failed on a hill. She told a cobbler to nail leather onto the brake blocks, the world's first brake pads. When they ran out of gasoline, Bertha stopped at a pharmacy in a small town and bought Ligro, a cleaning solvent. That pharmacy became the world's first gas station. Every time something broke, Bertha fixed it. Every time someone stared, she kept driving. And after 12 hours, they made it. 66 miles. The longest journey ever made by automobile. Bertha sent Karl a telegram. The trip was a success. The vehicle works. Come to Persheim. News spread like wildfire. Newspapers wrote about the woman who drove a horseless carriage across the country. People who had ignored Karl suddenly wanted to know more. Bertha Benz didn't just prove the Motorwagen worked. She showed the world that the age of the automobile had begun. The first car ever sold. After Bertha's legendary drive, everything changed. The Motorwagen was no longer a joke. It was a phenomenon. Orders started coming in, slowly at first, then faster. And in 1888, just months after Bertha's journey, Karl Benz sold his first automobile. The buyer, a French industrialist named Émile Roger. The price, 2,000 German marks, about $600 at the time. Today, adjusted for inflation, around $18,000. It doesn't sound like much, but that transaction was historic. For the first time in human history, someone bought a self-propelled vehicle. Not a carriage, not a bicycle, a car. By 1893, Karl Benz was selling dozens of vehicles a year. By 1900, Benz and CE became the world's largest automobile manufacturer. They built over 2,700 cars. But Karl wasn't alone anymore. Across Europe and America, other inventors saw what he'd done. Gottlieb Daimler and Wilhelm Maybach built their own motors. Peugeot started producing cars in France. And in America, a man named Henry Ford was watching closely. The automobile wasn't just a product anymore. It was a revolution. The birth of an industry. By the early 1900s, the automobile was spreading like wildfire. But there was a problem. Cars were expensive, handcrafted. Only the wealthy could afford them. Then in 1908, Henry Ford did something radical. He created the Model T, and more importantly, he created the assembly line. Mass production, standardized parts, lower costs. Suddenly, cars weren't just for the rich. They were for everyone. By 1927, Ford had sold over 15 million Model Ts. The car became the heartbeat of the 20th century. Roads were built, cities expanded, entire industries were born. Oil, rubber, steel, tourism, suburbs. The automobile didn't just change transportation, it changed civilization. Think about it. The way we live, the way we work, the way we travel, the way we fall in love. All of it traces back to a three-wheeled contraption in a German workshop, to a man who refused to quit, and to a woman who refused to wait. Today, there are over 1.4 billion cars on the road, electric, autonomous, faster than Karl Benz ever dreamed. But every single one owes its existence to that first patent, that first sale, that first drive. Lessons and legacy. So what can we learn from Karl and Bertha Benz? First, belief is everything. Karl Benz failed for years. His inventions didn't work. People mocked him. Investors abandoned him. But he believed. And more importantly, Bertha believed. When the world says no, belief keeps you going. Second, action beats perfection. Karl could have spent another decade refining the Motorwagen, making it faster, smoother, safer. But Bertha knew the truth. Done is better than perfect. The world doesn't change in the workshop. It changes on the road. Third, the most important innovations are the ones people can't imagine. In 1885, people couldn't imagine a world without horses. The automobile seemed unnecessary, ridiculous. But visionaries don't wait for permission. They build the future and let the world catch up. And finally, legacy isn't built by one person. Karl Benz invented the car, but without Bertha, it would have stayed in that workshop. Behind every great breakthrough, there's someone who believed when no one else did, someone who took the risk, someone who drove into the unknown. Today, Karl Benz and Bertha Benz are legends. Their names live on in Mercedes Benz, one of the most iconic brands in the world. But their real legacy isn't a car company. It's the reminder that the future belongs to those who build it, to those who fail and keep building, to those who dare and keep driving. So if you're working on something the world doesn't understand yet, if you're building something people call impossible, remember Karl, remember Bertha. They didn't have funding, they didn't have support, they didn't have proof it would work, but they had belief, they had action, and they had each other. And that was enough to change the world. Thanks for watching. If this story inspired you, leave a comment below. What dream are you driving toward? And remember, the road to the future starts with a single turn of the key.